Okay, everybody, welcome back to Generation Analog. We have two panels left, this one round table, and then after this, we're going to have one last panel, and then it'll be a day. So we're all really excited that you're here, and I'm thrilled to be moderating the session on what we call Homepunk, but our presenters might be a little confused because they actually entitled this Hope Punk. In their abstract. So we kind of twisted it a little bit and tweaked it to fit the theme because we really wanted to get this amazing group of folks in. So that said, Eric is going to be doing most of the formal moderation. I'm just keeping time and trying to reserve a little at the end for Q&A. Every presenter will have about 12 minutes to present, and then we'll have a little time for Q&A. And if there's any extra, it can flow out into the Discord. Y'all can chat there. So anyways, that said, is with my huge pleasure to introduce Eric Stein, who's going to take it away for Homepunk. Eric, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aaron. All right, let me get this up on the screen. I think we should be seeing some slides. Awesome. So thank you all for being here today. This is an extremely exciting panel with some really wonderful people who were gracious enough to respond to my call to come join and talk about their work. I'm going to try and talk really fast here at the beginning to give them all as much time as possible to talk because that's what we're here for. So let's dive right in. So this panel is called The Lived Politics of the Negative, Tabletop Game Designers on Punk, Practice, and Utopia. This panel flows out of Game Jam that happened in May and August of 2021, conceived by the scholar and designer Joe Lindsay Walton, which I helped Joe facilitate. This was a jam about using games to generate hopeful stories and scenarios about the future. We played with themes of climate change, ecological crisis, post-humanism, post-scarcity, Afrofuturism, solar punk, and more. And it was like this really wonderful, radical communal project that saw many incisive contributions to tabletop game design and play, which also posed profound challenges to the hegemony of tabletop publishing in the global north. However, in the years since this game jam, several of the creators involved have found their works forcibly assigned the homogenizing label of hope punk, a term which was coined by the fantasy author Alexander Rowland in 2017. Described by critics as weaponized optimism and the neoliberal circumscription of the imagination, hope punk has become a point of contention and one worth deconstructing. It was one among many points of inspiration for the Applied Hope Jam, but since then it's become very clear that the term is just yet another instrument of global colonial capitalism, a marketing term rather than a call to resistance. Hope punk, I've got a whole bunch of theoretical stuff, and I think we'll make this available afterwards if you're interested in diving into the theory. But two critical sources, and I can share these in the bibliography channel as well. Jose Esteban Munoz's paper "Gimme Gimme That This, Gimme Gimme That" on the punk rock commons in Los Angeles, formative, essential paper that I'm super grateful to Wendi for making known to me. This is where we get the phrase "the lived politics of the negative" here, and there's some citations on screen, and this will be available after the fact. Likewise, thinking about hope and specifically this idea of moving beyond hope, Adam Greenfield's recent book, Lifehouse, Taking Care of Ourselves in a World on Fire, with an excerpt in Ill Will recently, talks about how we can begin practically building structures for dignified collective survival. How can we design in a way that actually responds to the material conditions in which we live, rather than creating a kind of an empty hope that does not respond to any of that. So again, some theoretical resources here. I'm putting them on screen, but we'll move on relatively quickly. So what I really want to talk about today, and what the majority of this panel is going to be about, is going to be the work shown here on screen of 4 designers, 3 of whom are able to be here with us today, all of which were contributed to the Applied Hope Jam. Wendi Yu's Marvelous Mutations and Merry Musicians, Gabriel Caetano's Roots and Flowers, Cesar Capacle's Scraps, and Vitor Mattos's Moon Elves, as well as which there's this wonderful compendium that was just released online, Utopia on the Tabletop, which has some of our contributors' work in that compendium as well. So this is the work that we're going to be talking about today, and talking about the real praxis of design in tabletop games. And with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'm going to hand us right over to Wendi so that we can hear from the designers themselves. So stopping sharing. Wendi, the floor is yours.
Hey there, can you see my screen and hear me?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
good.
both.
Okay, so just a second all right. Hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I'm Wendi. I'm a Master in Contemporary Culture and Communication and a PhD student at the Federal University of Bahia, Brazil. In my research, I investigate the possibilities of trans life in Brazilian context through a contextual analysis of trans audiovisual performances. And I also create stuff with words and images, which includes tabletop role-playing games. And that's why I'm here right now. A couple years ago, two things happened. My game, Marvelous Mutations and Merry Musicians, won one of the categories in the Applied Hope Jam, and I was interviewed about it by a major gaming website. For a piece that was pitched to me as being about, quote, games that buck the post-apocalypse trend and explore possible futures with creativity, joy, and care at their core. In the end, the article was actually titled The Future of Tabletop Role Plays Hope. Homepunk can help us build a better world at the table. I was baffled and enraged, and so I tweeted, I love the word homepunk and everything related to it, I wrote. It restarted a whole discourse, and now we're here. So I want to take the chance to talk to you about some key words around this whole thing, hope, utopia, punk, the apocalypse, and how I personally articulate them in my work, hopefully in a useful anti-hegemonic way. Both hope and utopia as concepts have complex histories with widely varying uses and connotations depending on who you ask, especially considering the Anglosphere, where you had a president selling hope as a slogan just to bomb people of color as usual. The hope of hope punk and of common liberal usage is about a glass half full view of things, according to the creator of hope punk. The view that things will get better and thus you should not give up. I want to emphasize this. It's about a view of things. That's crucial. It's idealistic, detached from a material analysis of the world or even of media. From the vague attempts at defining hope punk and the actual works that identify like that, we can notice an emphasis on things like truly believing that we can get there if we care about each other as hard as we possibly can, or being kind merely for the sake of kindness and giving a fuck because the world is somehow mysteriously against all evidence worth it. Or in comfy ideas like love, kindness, and faith in humanity, or radical self-care, or a weaponized aesthetic of softness, wholesomeness, or cuteness. It confuses feelings and stories with political action, stating that choosing kindness, optimism, and softness over hardness, cynicism, and violence can be a powerful political choice, and that being kind is a political act, an act of rebellion, or even that crying is also hope punk, because crying means you still have feelings, and feelings are how you know you're alive. It is vaguely liberal, yes, but more importantly, it's vague. It's superficial, it's not tied to any deep analysis of how things are and how they can be changed. It's hope as faith against all evidence. It's mostly empty, mostly directed at making bourgeois Anglos feel comfy in a world in crisis, and also it's marketable. As most Def said of Drake, it's likable, it's compatible with shopping. I'm a communist though, and a Brazilian one, so I think you can see how I can accept being bundled with that. Paulo Freire, another Brazilian communist, says that there's no talking about hope with arms crossed and passively waiting. It only makes sense when full of hope, we fight to make the announced future a concrete reality. Hope for him is an existential and historical imperative that sustains the fight, but that only exists within the fight. Not fight as hashtag resistance, but as the actual fight for liberation of the oppressed classes, an action necessarily based on a material understanding of reality. It is then born of the present, and in the present of the struggle gives meaning to the future, not as an alienated vagueness or as something predetermined, but to the future as a work of construction. We can see the difference between these two understandings of hope in the words of the Zapatistas. Hope for those above is a commodity, but for those below, it is a fight for certainty. We will get what we need and deserve because we are organizing and we are fighting for it. I'm not saying then that it is all about taking up arms and throwing Molotovs, that stories, ideas, feelings, even comfy ones, don't matter. On the contrary, I wouldn't research culture if that was the case. The Zapatistas themselves had an armed uprising, but also a radical cultural struggle. I believe in the power of stories, not in the bullshitty Neil Gaiman masterclass stories are magic way, but collectively as a side of struggle around the definition of what matters to us, what is worth investing our energy in. They help mobilize and engage people in certain directions. Take Utopia, for example. It's commonly understood as a mere dream with no basis in reality and therefore useless, or as an escapist fantasy, which could be useful in freeing our mind and soul from the prison of the current world, as Le Guin said, or detrimental in distracting us for the current conjuncture. But there are other notions of utopia. Walter Benjamin, for example, says its function is to illuminate the sector of what is worth of destruction. And I think that's more useful for what we are talking about here. I tend to agree with writers such as Bloch or Munoz that utopias are primarily a negation that in negating what is, point towards what should be. The essential function of utopia is a critique of what is present, says Bloch. Utopias are not prescriptive, but express a desire for something else. They are also not about ignoring the present, but facing it in its complexity and expressing how it's lacking. They remind us that there is something missing, that the present is not enough, as Munoz says. They are a fabulated critique of this world that remind us that major social orders do rise and fall, and that new social orders do succeed them, as Raymond Williams says. To use the words of Ursula Le Guin, herself a creator of utopias, utopias serve to remind us that we live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable, but then so did the divine right of kings. But they do remind us that we live in capitalism while saying we should escape it. Eric's introduction would give us what, 5 minutes? Would give us more than enough for dealing with punk itself. So I just want to add a couple of things related to what we're talking about here. When I tweeted about Homepunk, some people said it's a dumb name because punk is inherently hopeful. I don't necessarily agree, but I think that it depends on what you mean by both of those words. Punk is not even a reference to punk itself. It is a suffix descended from cyberpunk, denoting an aesthetic or market label. But even in its more traditional sense, punk is not so simply defined. The way I see it, inspired by Munoz and others like Jana Brown and Jack Halberstam, punk is not exactly a genre nor an aesthetic category, but an effective and aesthetic formation that can express itself and engages by performances of rage against a certain world, a certain context, a certain status quo. It's a fuck you too, there is no alternative. It is not inherently tied to any political ideology. That's how you get swastika wearing punks, for example. And this againstness is not necessarily hopeful, but it's a negation that is then full of utopian potential, which by its destructive, noisy, chaotic character performs an apocalyptic kind of utopia, that this world is wrong and it must be destroyed. But when I say that the world must end, I don't mean the planet, nor do I mean some apotheotic catastrophe that will wipe out society or something. A world is a specific way of organizing lived reality. It's a whole way of being with in a given space-time, which defines the horizon, what is possible, thinkable, imaginable. It involves specific ontologies and epistemologies and a system of structures, knowledges, practices that sustain it and that it sustains. The planet is home to much more than a single world. For many people, the end of their world was centuries ago when the colonizers arrived. Many other worlds struggle to this day to keep existing. There is one world that presumes itself universal, that has taken for itself the mantle of the world with a capital W. It's the world of race, of gender, of cis heteronormativity, of capital, the Euro-modern world of colonialism. As Fanon says, is a narrow world strewn with violence. This world is based on all those forms of violent hierarchies interconnected at its very existential core. It kills worlds, destroys lives, and it's ruining the very planet it inhabits. So to get out of this mess, to work towards actual decolonization, to fight against all forms of oppression, we need to have the end of this world as the horizon. That's why MSSR says the end of the world is the only thing worth beginning. And J. Mombassa says the apocalypse of this world seems to be the only reasonable political demand. And as Walter Benjamin says, this world won't die of natural causes, so we can just sit back and hope for its end. So the end of the world I'm talking about is not a meteor or a deadly virus or the total collapse of humankind. It's undoing the political, economic, cultural, and on-top epistemological structures that sustain this world. It requires actual organized labor and take times, but also requires new metaphors and utopias working to change the very horizon of what engaged the struggle. I see tabletop role-playing games as performance, not as in performance art or as theatricality, but as defined by performance studies as a set of embodied, culturally shared, reiterated practices and behaviors. They create an embodied dialogue between the work and the players that is more than textual. The players inhabit the characters who experience certain situations. This is for me a unique medium for exploring certain things in an open, non-prescriptive way. I make my games in a way that everything, text, art, mechanics, layout is there to guide players and readers towards certain experiences which they can explore on their own according to their own sets of beliefs, assumptions, etc. It hopefully creates a dialogic experience that challenges assumptions or provides cathartic release or something, but is also engaging or fun. It is a game after all. And it's not didactic or dogmatic because they are getting there by themselves. My last game here, Derby Monsters, is more explicitly punk, both in ethos and aesthetics, but I focus here on Marvelous Mutations and Merry Musicians, where you play as a band of mutants touring a post-apocalyptic land and getting in adventures along the way. I'm finishing. It tries to fabulate a post-capitalist future, a post-apocalypse that does not keep the structures of this world after its end, like mainstream media tends to do, like the cliche attributed to Frederick Jameson that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. It's an imagination exercise in utopia building. There are some key tenets: no capitalism, no firearms, everyone has some kind of mutation, live entertainment is highly valued, the landscape is full of ruins of what came before, but they are filled with life. The setting is described as weird, and this weirdness is essential to the thing since normal is what this world makes itself. All the rest is created collaboratively by the group. The shape of each world is not determined by me, but by the players. So this game tries to be an exercise in utopia, a reminder that this world is not all we can have, and its structures are not eternal. In this refusal of this world and this knowledge, it can even be said to be punk in a way. But the hope that can only come from ourselves, engaged by desire to burn this shit down, actually understanding the material circumstances of our context and doing something about it. Thank you, Free Palestine and the imperialist genocides in Congo and Sudan. Por um mundo onde caibam muitos mundos. Good night.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Amazing. I'm going to throw us right along to Vitor. You're up next for us.
Hello. You all hear me, right? Okay. Yeah. Differently from Wendy, I don't have PowerPoints or nothing. Kind of nothing prepared really. I'll talk about my zine. I don't know if I even can call it a game. Yeah, I talk about this in the beginning of it, but either way, Moon Elves was born of a provocation that my girlfriend set up to me. Like, oh, why do you always like create words and playing words they're either feudalistic or capitalistic, right? And yeah, usually like classical RPGs are very much based around going after treasure or types of currency, and set in these words of inequality, of war, of many social problems that sometimes are seen through with a lens. Like in the best ways, these are like, oh yeah, we were fighting against inequality. The reason you're going after this treasure is, right, you need it. There's hunger. There's the core conflict of these words are I mean, can be like good versus evil, or more terribly, like good races versus evil races, or like and even if you go to the more progressive ones, we're still fighting against inequality, war. We're still like fighting against injustice, right? Still, but we don't use this imagination tool that is RPG design or RPG play to actually think of something radically different from our lived realities. Right. So from this was born like my Moon Elves as an exercise of talking about a communist utopia. And then this I wanted to be not halfway communist, like be completely, like I use vocabulary as like communism, socialism, Soviet, cultural revolution, etc. And I also didn't want it to be like this Jetsons utopia. This I think that I mean dystopia has this has become kind of stale lately, I do think. But I think that utopia without some dystopic elements to it doesn't work. Like what Wendy was saying, that like to actually create a new world, we need to end the previous one, and like revolution will not be Pacific or like so I put forward this the Friedrich Engels maxim of like the bourgeoisie society is in the crossroads. We either progress into socialism, or we fall into barbarism. Right? That's became famous with Rosa Luxemburg. And I made this like both true, right? Both happens at the same time in a way, right? The world is destroyed. Capitalism, imperialism, and nuclear warfare destroys the world, or climate change or whatever destroys the world. And at the same time, some crazy scientists and people in the cosmonauts in the moon managed to have a revolution and create a communist society. And not only, and I also didn't want to have the setting into this transition phase, because this I also think there is more things about it, but like far future socialism into communism now, like no inequality, no war, no hunger, nothing. People don't have money. You can do whatever you want. You don't need to work for a living. And going crazy as well. Like, oh, you can live forever, and the so and that's the problem as well. Like, what conflict do we have then, right? How and this I don't know if the game actually answers this, but this was also like a very important design idea. Like if previously conflict is okay, is focused on war, on inequality. If we end all of this, what then, right? And I don't know. I put some ideas there, and I leave this provocation for the players. Like, what kind of conflict will we create here? It's usually about more philosophical, or right? We're still gonna have people debating to what kind of communism and socialism we are constructing, right? Some anarchists wants to, one of the ideas is some anarchists want to end the state, but people are arguing, does the state still exist in this non-conflict area? So yeah, and I don't know if this was done or not. Like, but I think like that's this utopia thought. Sorry, I'm kind of. But yeah, like do we expand socialism or communism through the destroyed world that is falling into fascistic barbarism or not? And put forward this, if we create how will be our relationship with nature in a point that we can basically domesticate it entirely? How will we actually fight boredom and depression now that, like, without a striving force to without something, like without being told where to work? Will we actually not like be bored forever? And or how do we organize ourselves in direct democracy? Do we always use that? Aren't this, but we don't want a society that is all about like infinite meetings to solve quotidian stuff, right? So yeah, this was basically it for my design process. And yeah, I'm all in with Wendy, long free Palestine, and like that's it. I think I'm over.
You're good. That was great.
Awesome. Thank you, Vitor. All right, let's throw over to Gabriel to bring us home.
Gabriel, when your camera is off, we can't see you.
I think there's some
event.
background tech issues.
Hello.
Good.
I apologize. My brother-in-law started to sing like right at this moment about the whole day. All right, so hello everyone. First of all, I would like to share my presentation with you. Just a moment, please. Please let me know if everything's fine. Can you hear me at a nice volume? Is everything okay?
It's a bit quiet, so I'm not sure if
It's
you
a
can
bit
be a bit.
quiet.
Mhm.
Let me see it improves a little bit. Is it a little better now? Is it a little better now?
I think when you moved your mic up a little bit, I could hear it a bit
Yeah,
better.
it was better, right? Yeah. Just a moment. Okay, how's it now?
It's about we can hear
Still
you.
the
but
same. All
yeah.
right.
Jump on in.
Yeah.
Okay. I suppose this will improve a little.
Hey, that's great.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I am going to share my presentation with you. Okay, so I suppose we can see it. Yes? Excellent. So, first of all, thanks for having me here. My name is Gabriel Caetano Barbosa. I make the TRPG, role-playing games. I also am a GM for hire. I'm an audio editor as well, post-producer for podcasts and stuff. And I am very happy to be here in this panel together with Wendy, together with Victor, together with, this is amazing. It's like, you know, you know. So yes, I came here to talk about Roots and Flowers, which is the game that I made for the Jam. Okay, now Roots and Flowers was born actually out of a lot of frustration. In 2021, it was like I was more involved with the world of Dungeons and Dragons than ever, and I was like playing games and enjoying games and listening to podcasts and stuff, and that's when I became aware of the, let's put it lightly, extremely awful practices of the company involved and the content of the game itself. It's turned me on to Wonderhome. I hope y'all are acquainted with it, which in turn turned me on to game design. And coincidentally, I came across the Brain Trust community. Shout outs to the Brain Trust community, and the game design servers here and there. I ended up coming across the Solarpunk jam and the Applied Hope jam. There were two jams going on at the same time back then, and Roots and Flowers was my second submission to those jams. Now,
Looks like we've lost. Oh. Wouldn't be a Zoom conference without technical challenges.
Yeah, we've lost Gabriel for a moment.
Okay, let's give it a second. See if she can reconnect.
We're just giving it a minute and we'll start Q&A up if this doesn't go away. So start thinking of your question and typing if you have some questions for the panelists. So yeah,
All
I
right.
think we're gonna move on to Q&A. Eric, do you want to be the respondent for and host the Q&A, or would you like me to?
Yeah, totally. I think that's fine. Yeah, so let's jump in. We'll I'll say at the beginning, we're planning to make a bunch of these materials available to everyone after the fact so that you can refer to slide decks and notes and all that fun stuff. So but yeah, let's go ahead with questions so we can drop
Actually,
those in the
I think Gabriel might be back, so maybe we can give
Ooh. Yep, I see another Gabriel, I see you on a different device. Oh,
back.
Oh,
I think we've got a good 7 minutes left if you'd like to.
7 minutes. Okay, let's make it worth it. So yeah, as I was saying, the struggle with the struggle with making this game was playing something that was beyond just playing cops or proto cops or just being like colonizers, tomb robbers, and the struggle was in the goal of this game was actually in playing something else, playing people who are taking care of each other and taking care of their community, as well as taking care of their, as well as striving, and not only surviving, right? And so moving on here, just a few panels. Okay. The fantasy of the apocalypse is one in which, like a lot of movies, especially like dystopian movies, like to enjoy the idea of like, oh yeah, in the apocalypse, I'm gonna be like some sort of hero. I'm gonna have my bunker. I'm gonna protect everyone. I'm gonna carry guns around and etc. And honestly, no, nobody's gonna do that. Honestly, the apocalypse is not gonna be some sort of like one day, one thing was everything, everything was in a way, and then next thing it's not anymore. That's not how it works. We are living in the apocalypse right now as we go. It's slow, it's painful, it's sore. And for some even more than others, and we see the example of whatever of everything that is going on in Palestine right now. And so basically this fantasy of this apocalypse where some people are going to be heroes, against the world, is actually just a projection of the white supremacy, of fascism, of like the exceptionalism of certain individuals. And I bring with this game also the Olivia Hill rule, all right, or a variation of it, and the anti-capitalist attribution cooperative license by Takuma Okada. You should look it up because I think that part of the ethos of creating things for a brighter, inclusive, all embracing future is also making sure that fascism, doesn't get to have space. In Roots and Flowers, I bring a few key elements. I try to bring a game that is not antagonistic by nature, where we are not fighting things off. We are not trying to overcome an opponent. We're not trying to be the winners. The game is community center, and this is a world in which the past has left scars upon it. Because as we move into the future, we also have to deal with all of the damage that we have done and the people who came just before us have done as well. It is a game that tries to include or touch upon, even if very lightly, superficially, the knowledge from our ancestors, as well as the magic of small things, and not in a kind of wondrous, blah, resurrection kind of way, but more in the magic of care and giving love to each other and giving and being gentle. Uh, and also, it has community building roles embedded in the game. And with it, I'm asking the question, is conflict all there is? What happens when we take conflict away of the occasion in role-playing games? And, well, what happens, right? And what I'm gonna say is that no, conflict is not what we need to play interesting games. We use conflict as a shorthand for uncertainty. Okay, what drives the stories forwards, what makes the stories interesting, is not conflict, is uncertainty. Conflict is a cheap and overused form of uncertainty, and I say cheap because we do it a lot, so it's become, just like easy. But there are other ways to engage with stories out there, right? And Roots and Flowers brings up the politics of thriving as a community, okay, in which we do way more than surviving. We can, thriving is in itself a form of resisting, okay? Thriving is a form of um living, as being marginalized people, as being queer, as being from the global south, being a person of color. Thriving is just more than being alive. It is a declaration of our existence. It is a form of standing upon all of the things that wants to, in many ways, just literally see us gone. And so I tried to bring that using a simple system. Lasers and feelings was, there was not really anything particular to that system. It was something that was a hand and I liked. And I think it fit the theme for being so simple, so easy for anyone to pick up and play. And I bring along the journeying tools, taken out from Wonder Home, but also including other safety tools such as cats or lens and veils. And I also do that with a light setting, okay? And all of that is because I want to promote a certain style of play, all right, where players get to choose what they are going to do, but the tools that they receive, the backgrounds that they get, for example, to create characters and etc., they encourage certain types of play and of problem solving. So you don't get a gun, you get a map. You don't get a sword, you get a computer. You get to be an engineer or a mediator, okay? And just to wrap it up, I want to bring up this quote from Ursula K. Le Guin, and that conflict is one kind of behavior, and there are others equally important in any human life, such as relating and finding and losing and bearing, discovering, parting and changing. And so, what happens when we design games, when we make games, when we imagine possible ways of interacting with worlds beyond our own? With other forms of behaviors, with other modes of play, beyond conflict and beyond fighting. Fighting is not the problem, and it's not that it shouldn't be ruled out, but it's just one thing that we can do. We can do so much more, and including conflict. And with that, I just want to say thank you. And I am I appreciate being here in the Generation Analog 2024 panel. And that's it. Thank you.
I'm so glad you were able to reconnect. I was like, oh, I want to hear the end of this. Amazing. We thank you all of our panelists. We have some time left here now for Q&A at the end. So please go ahead, drop questions in the Zoom chat. I'm also looking at Discord. And so, yeah. Maybe as people are thinking about questions, I'll pose a question to our panel. Or unless Aaron, unless you're saying something.
I see one
You've
here
got
as well in
one.
the Q&A.
You should pose the question, but we also have one in the Q&A.
Oh, I'm looking in the wrong
Yes.
place. I was looking in the chat. Thank you. Okay, from Austin. Homepunk wasn't a term I was familiar with, so this may be a bit basic, but I'm curious where Homepunk fits within the larger cultural matrix of -punk genres, cyberpunk, steampunk, solarpunk, etc. Further, where do your departures fit within that larger -punk matrix? We can throw this to the whole group, I think. anyone want to take that one first?
I don't know, man. This blah 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 punk thing. I think so. Like it lost its meaning, you know. Yeah, like whole punk. I wasn't even familiar. And like a quick Wikipedia reading, I find it like completely nonsense. Like putting a lot of very unrelated literary works together. Like yeah, pretty much vague. Like Wendy said. I use a little bit of solar punk as like aesthetically, you know, because I mean to be ecological and it's something that's increasingly like important, sustainable. So yeah, but still, I think those punk stuff are those blah 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 punk lost a lot of them in general.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe Wendy, you talked about how it's hope punk as a phrase is kind of this vague, empty term that has like some nice superficial feelings, but like doesn't actually convey anything of like material substance. And so maybe if you could speak to that a little bit more, since you talked about that so much in your talk.
Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think all of those hyphen punk genres or labels, they are not related to punk itself, but the punk became a empty suffix that means that whatever is attached to it is the common denominator behind the works in that specific label. For example, biopunk is related to biotech, steampunk's related to steam engines, pizza punk, it would be all about pizza and stuff like that. It's
It
but
was I had some friends that have their band was called Pizza Punk. Now that you say,
but the thing about hope punk is that and about a lot of other slash punks is that its definition is vague and it's based on a vague definition of hope itself. And I think that's one of my big issues. And not only that, but a very narrow, very wide, very from the global north perspective um, of what resistance and what struggle is, and what is hoped for. At least from what I've seen, and from those fundamental texts that try to define it, like from Roland and from Alejandra Romero, I think, Romano, Asia Romano, I'm sorry, and the works that define themselves as hope punk, you see that the focus on kindness and self-care, and it's very non-threatening, and I think that's my issue with that. And regarding how my work fits that, I think as I said, my last game here, Devil Monsters, is more explicitly punk, both in ethos and aesthetics, because you play as a group of monsters fighting monster hunters, Nazi occultists, and things like that. It's about embracing monstrosity, fighting back, protecting each other, etc. So it's very much an expression of rage against the systems that create, exploit, or try to annihilate difference as otherness. So there was a punk influence that grew from that rage against the systems. But as I said, I think Marvelous Mutations and Merry Musicians is kind of punk in this way that it articulates an apocalyptic utopia and how I approach game design by trying to fabulate other non-capitalist worlds and letting the players experience that by themselves, not being prescriptive, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's really great. And like thinking about the work that came out of Applied Hope and like this kind of dispersed community of thinking through these like complicated questions of design and like global colonial capture of so many things, and then seeing so quickly this like apparatus of capture come into effect post Jam and in the years that have followed, where it's like all of a sudden you just see this like this bulldozer scooping up all of these like really different and unique games and just like dumping them into the Homepunk pile and saying, here's this pile of commodities to consume. And I think like the rage at seeing that happen is really like the impetus for the panel, because it's like, hey, like there's like this capture that's happening, this garbage pile that all of this work has been turned into. This is a real problem, and we need to talk about this seriously. I wanted to kind of take these two questions in the chat here because they're both for Gabriel about your design. Can you share some examples from your own game design of this paradigm of thinking through like what is hopeful but materially engaged design, as well as speaking more on different mechanics to help design games of community and connection and continue to create beyond the mechanics of conflict? And I think both of these questions are really getting to what I loved about your design work, Gabriel, about like thinking really critically about like the scars and the impacts of the world before, like you talk about in Roots and Flowers, and how we build something actively in the present and designing a game to work through those questions. I think this is something really interesting in your work. So if you want to talk more about mechanics, design paradigm, anything there that inspires you.
Okay. I just sent a reply there to get a clarification on the paradigm specifically for Sarah. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So, but I'll go on with the next one. And actually, mechanics to help design games of community and connection, and specifically beyond the mechanics of conflict. I'm gonna flip that around. That I'm gonna point specifically to Here There Be Monsters, which it's I guess probably my favorite work by Wendy Yu, and one of my favorite works ever. Almost got a physical copy. I'm still gonna get one. Uh, and in any case, I think that Wendy does a powerful statement in that game specifically that I could have done no better, and I can probably do no better at this point, which is like, at some point when explaining the mechanics of the game, here's what you do, here's where you roll dice. There is a paragraph, and I think it's called combat, and a header, and it just resumes the whole thing as a simple as a single paragraph, if I remember correctly, which is you just do everything as you would do everything else. You just roll as you would do for everything else, and it may the point is that like it's very hard to write mechanics that are not about conflict when you spend like 10 pages or 20 pages or hundreds of pages in your book in resolving conflict, in a game. I think it stands on, I think it took me a while to figure what Ursula Le Guin meant within like the sphere of designing a game with like modes of behavior, modes of play. That quote specifically, I first came across it on Vincent Baker's blog, at the Lampley website. And I was thinking, what does that mean? I couldn't figure for the life of me what is. But basically, every time you make a game that is about world building, you are doing something that is beyond conflicts because this is a game about discovery now. Every time you play a part of a game that is about like asking questions, every time that you play a game that is, or a part of a game that is about building something, every time you play a game that is about finding information, every time you play a game that has a mechanic in which you ask the next person, open your heart to me, look at all those modes of play. So the key is to, I would say, because of the general gist of game design, I would say we can cut down a little bit on conflict resolution mechanics, or make them simpler, or not make them specific at all right? While adding other types of mechanics that just propose that the players ask each other different questions, because if we establish the role-playing games are a form of conversation from which we find a story out of, eventually we get to the point where this conversation can have so many different subjects as a real life conversation has. We talk about so many things, and even like in our lives are not uninteresting per se, you know, just because they lack the conflict that seems to be so prevalent in everything, you know. Uh, and just to finish it off, I think that the point is that if you take a step back and understand that conflict is a tool, it's one of the tools for telling a story, and there are others. And if you just circle back to uncertainty, because this is what we're playing with, uncertainty. What's going to happen next? Or if you are familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse games, Apocalypse World, we're playing to find out. The games, all stories are centered around uncertainty. What's going to happen next? And sometimes one of ways to display that is through conflict, but there are other ways. What are we going to find around the next bend of the river? What is this person going to tell me? What is my inner turmoil? What is there are so many things that are happening. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I love this book, Chronicles of an Announced Death. It's a brilliant book because at the very start of the book it just says, in the very chapter it describes exactly what is the murder of the book, who did it, at what time, with what weapon, and etc. The murder mystery, there's no murder mystery. You know, someone already died. We already know who did it. We already know what happened. So what happens next? What do we have then? Everything else. Why? Who, what's the relations? What's going on in this community? What's drove people to that crime, or to hurting each other like that? What is like, there's so much that we can learn by asking questions that go beyond who is going to win. So this is my cue there, you know.
I think that's a beautiful phrase. What happens next? Everything else. I think we can probably use that as a bit of a closer here as we come to the end of our time on this panel. I just want to say a huge thank you to Vitor, Gabriel, and Wendi. Thank you so much for your time here. Thank you so much for your ideas and your design work. I've linked the games talked about here, as well as the work of Cesar Capacle, who is one of our compatriots who is not able to join us today. It's all linked in the recommended games channel. Go buy their work. It's really good. Give these creators your dollars, because they're doing really important stuff in the world. And yeah, we need more of that kind of work, and more resistance to the really homogenizing stuff that we see getting churned out by the big corporations of our day. So yeah, thank you presenters. Thank you all for being here, all of our attendees as well. And we can continue our chat in the Discord server.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So I recommend that all of our panelists hop straight there and spend some time with your adoring fans who really want to talk about Grimdark with you right now.
Apparently,
So,
yes, it's become the topic.
And everybody else, I encourage you to throw on Ramon's Leave Home. It's about 30 minutes, and you can listen to it between Homepunk and No Home, which is our final panel of the day. And we'll see you in 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.